I forgot to mention Mr. Arthur's name. I have at this time a letter I'd like to read from dear Sister Dyer, our president, from the fellowship. Dear ones, once again I thank each one of you for your generous monetary gift and for your individual gifts and cards bearing your greetings. I only wish time permitted me to thank each one of you personally, but I know you will bear with me since our SRF family has become so large. In my heart I have thanked each one of you. I pray that with the passing of each day of the new year, I may be better able to convey the depth and warmth of my love and friendship for you, by better serving you all in God's and Guru's name. To see you racing swiftly toward God, to see you filled with His peace, love, and understanding, this is my loving, prayerful wish for each one of you in the new year. God and Guru love you all. Signed, Sister Dyer. I know she has a tremendous task, and I know that we all send our prayers that Master's work be carried on through her and the others who are trying to carry it on. Subject this morning, the power of truth. The power of truth. Truth, although at times seems to be relegated to the background, those who cling to it and stay with it, so to speak, in the end will be vindicated without doubt. Never doubt that. There's a story about St. Anthony where there was widespread dispute about the divinity of Jesus Christ. But he, utilizing the power of truth, was able to convince one gathering beyond all question of a doubt when he said, I have seen him. I have seen him. Because the power of truth was behind those 4 words, he was able to even change atheists to becoming believers and dispel that error. So do not be afraid of the power of truth that's in you. Utilize it, as St. Anthony did. The truth will stand where other things will fall. Cling to the truth. As Master said one time, always welcome truth, and you will find me there to welcome you under all conditions, at all times. So let us not be afraid to stand on truth. Master had that power of truth, of course, with him. I remember on several occasions he was able, just as St. Anthony had changed atheists into believers, so the Master had changed those people who were really set on following untruth and had changed them to follow truth. One incident comes to my mind about a young man who was quite unbalanced. And I heard this myself. And he was carrying on, sticking to one wrong point, and you couldn't get him off of it. And suddenly the Master, with great power of truth, shouted. The young man quieted down and followed. The power of truth is tremendous, because the power of truth is God alone, if you can arouse it, as the Master did. One thing comes to my mind about a personal matter. I used to be very thin. Quite thin. No one likes a skinny person, you know. I was real thin. I weighed 137 and no more. I couldn't get out of that. I couldn't get above or below that even, no matter whether I ate or didn't eat. And so I used to ask the Master, and he said, well, I don't know whether he did this to console me or to help me to wait a little bit. He says, you know, the saints in India like to be kind of round and big. Well, I said, that's fine, but I still weigh 137. He said, you'll be all right, he said. You'll be all right. And by the grace of God, it wasn't too long before I did break through that limited 137, and then, of course, I went the other way. I went too big. I went 200, and that didn't please everybody at all. So then I had to start the other way. And now I think I'm about right. And everybody seems pleased, so I guess it must be right. And reminds me of the story of the father and his son and the jackass. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but they started out with this jackass, and first one would ride, and someone would come along and say, isn't that a shame to see the father walking and the son riding? So down he'd get, and the father'd get up on. And the same thing would happen. Wouldn't you think they'd let that little boy ride up there? So then they both got up on. Then the people said, look at them. Two riding that little jackass. Then they both got off and carried the jackass. Everybody was satisfied. So everybody's satisfied now with the weight. And taking this matter in a little more serious vein, in the autobiography you'll read about Master's sister Nalini. She was quite thin, too. So thin that caused disturbances in the family, and as I said, no one likes a thin person. Not too thin. And yet she followed her brother and performed all the spiritual activities which he gave to her, and diet and so forth. Still, she retained that thinness. And so she spoke to him and said that, but I long to be as stout as you are. And then the Master said this, which I'd like to just read to you. I replied solemnly, by the grace of God, as I have spoken truth always, I speak truly now. Through the divine blessings, your body shall verily change from today. In 1 month it shall have the same weight as mine. And of course, you have read the story. That is just what happened. And so the power of truth, if you utilize the power of truth, as Master said, when I am in divine consciousness, the things I say come true. And I saw that many times. The things he said would come true, just as in my weight and in his sister's weight. These things have a great spiritual law behind them, the power of truth. That is, if you live it. Not if you just speak it once in a while, but if you live it, it does carry weight, and the power can be felt and seen. So, truth will prevail. In this world in which we find ourselves, the opposite seems to be prevalent. Untruth and evil seem to receive the greatest attention. But if you cling to truth, these other things, untruths and evil, will pass away in time. But truth will remain, and truth will be vindicated. Let us not forget that. Truth must stand. Truth is real, because the greatest truth is God Himself, and that will last. So do not be discouraged if you think that in this world existence, things of evil, those who make the greatest noise and talk the loudest and create the greatest commotion, they receive attention, that's right. They receive more attention than a quiet person who is living truth. But in the end, it must come out right. Truth will be vindicated. Do not forget that. And so, because of this great power of truth, history can be changed by those who live in truth and exercise its power. Just as Gandhi was a man of little stature, but he had a tremendous spirit. And look what happened. Why? Because he lived truth. The whole course of India as a nation was changed. I remember Master used to say, India's freedom will come. India's freedom will come. I don't know when, he said, but it will come. and how wonderful it was in his lifetime to see it. And he rejoiced. Why? It came because Gandhi followed truth. Gandhi's nonviolence, which is truth, won. It wasn't for any other reason than that. And there India attained her independence without firing a shot, so to speak. So the power of truth in the hearts of sincere, truthful men can change history. Realize that. So we should cling to truth and not be disturbed if it seems to be going the other way. In the autobiography we read this about Gandhi, or about what he has done. The Hindu scriptures declare that those who habitually speak the truth develop the power of materializing their words. What commands they utter from the heart come to pass. And therefore, Mahatma Gandhi often said, truth is God. That's the supreme truth. Why should we fail? Why should we be afraid to stand on truth? It's God himself. And so, Master has written, Gandhi often said, truth is God. His lifelong striving was for perfect truth in thought and act. Now, although truth will prevail, there's no question about that, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. Jesus said that, didn't he, when he said, cast not your pearls before swine, lest they be trampled on? Therefore, at the psychological moment, you inject the shaft of truth. Then it will be received. But if you inject it at an inopportune time, it will be rejected. That's what he means. And that's what we should do. We should stand on truth, but not be foolish to try to make people accept truth who do not want to accept it at that time. Wait, as the Master said. Give them love. They will change. Then, at the opportune time, slip in the shaft of truth, and they will receive it. Truth is real. But when we live in a world of this cosmic dream, we have to follow its laws. And that is one of its laws. Another thing which we must recognize in discussing this subject, the power of truth, is the law of karma. The law of karma. Emerson says these wonderful words, every virtue will be rewarded, every wrong redressed in silence and certainty. That's the power of truth. Let us realize that. And so let us not be taken up by using disturbing forces just to perhaps create a sensation, or distorting facts just to create a sensation, or to gain a quick advantage. Don't do that, because in the end you will lose out. The law of karma will exact its toll, but rather stand on truth and wait patiently for the law of the power of truth to work through you. Master often said, as I quoted a few minutes ago, always welcome truth, and you will find me there to help you more than you can imagine. He was speaking from the omniscient presence of God, the Christ consciousness within him. And so the power of truth will prevail in the end. If we are patient and do not become excited and restless and want it to happen our way, then it will not happen. But if you wait patiently for him, the one eternal truth, God's presence, it will happen. And so many people will say anything at times to gain the advantage, won't they? Sri Tessaji says this. He says, some people try to be tall by cutting off the heads of others. And that's the way some people, anything to get their point. But his Master said, always welcome truth, and you will find me there, always ready to help you. Don't play politics with me, he said. Have I ever played politics with you? We all shouted, no. He said, don't play them with me then. but always welcome truth, and you'll find me there to help you. Blessed are they who are reviled and persecuted for truth's sake, for they shall be vindicated. Realize that. Accept it. And when persecution comes and misunderstanding, don't be alarmed, because you're not the only one that was misunderstood. I'm not the only one that was persecuted. Look through all religious histories, and you'll find the great saints were persecuted, even expelled from their own monasteries. Why? Because they spoke the truth. Some would say God was speaking through them, and they'd be persecuted for that. And so, when you are persecuted for the sake of truth, rejoice, because you will be vindicated without doubt. I know in the autobiography, Master speaks about his own father, who wanted him to offered him a good position on the railway of which he was an officer. But the Master refused it, because within him was the power of truth speaking, telling him to follow this path where he could help so many people. And he did that. His father was disappointed and hurt at first, but in the end, who financed his coming to America? And who helped him while he was here somewhat? His father. Such is the power of truth to change conviction of people. I know one thing comes to my mind in my own case. I used to come out to California, as some of you know, twice a year. And I remember one friend said to me, he says, "What's the idea? What do you find out in California?" He says, "Why not go to Florida? It's only 1,000 miles, I think, something like that. Why go way out there?" So I just smiled a little bit. I couldn't tell him, but I said, I like it out there or something. And then my father was the same way. At first he wondered. He said he wondered why I went so far. But he changed too, through the power of truth. And I remember how wonderful it was toward the end of his life. One day he said, when Dr. and Mildred return from California, they are changed. Such is the power of truth. He could see. He never resisted me, but he had his own ideas. But he was a very good soul, and in the end he said those wonderful things, much to say, go on to California. I don't know what it is there, but go, because when you return you're changed. And that's the real power of truth, which we felt when we went to California to be with the Master. And so, finally, the greatest benefit that we will receive from the power of truth is freedom. Freedom and immortality. That's what you will receive. That's what the power of truth will give you if you follow it. Freedom. Freedom in the great omniscient presence of God. Freedom in His great love. Immortality. Now, Jesus said just that. These are not just my words. Jesus said this in St. John, the 8th chapter, 31st and 32nd verses. If ye continue in my word, then you are my disciples indeed, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. That's the power of truth, to give you freedom from this nightmare of this worldly existence. To give you freedom in the great omniscient presence of God, His great consciousness. If, as it says, you continue in my word. That's the point. Now, what is the truth behind the word? It is this. You all know, you've heard it many times. The word is the great comforter of which Jesus spoke, the holy vibration, with its different aspects of light and sound, but greatest of all, in that word is what? Truth. God's presence itself. And if you continue in that and merge in that through your daily meditations and through your prayers to God, you will without doubt be free. And as it says, ye shall be free indeed. Because in that word, in that holy vibration, is God's presence itself, God's consciousness, God's great cosmic energy, which pervades all space, is not limited by anything. That's the power of truth. That's what truth will give you if you follow it. Freedom. Freedom from this bubble of ego and this worldly existence. Self-realization fellowship teachings will give you the ways and the means to contact that word. Behind all religion is truth. Behind self-realization is the greatest truth, because it gives us the ways and the means to contact reality and truth. It does not just talk about it. It gives us the ways and the means through its techniques and its meditations to be one with truth. And being one with truth, we will be free. Being one with truth, we will attain immortality. Because as St. Paul said, I protest by the rejoicing I have in Christ, I die daily. He protested means he declared by the joy he felt of Christ's consciousness that he was free and immortal. He died daily to this outward consciousness which keeps us in mortal consciousness. He died to that, therefore he lived in the immortal consciousness within. That's what the welcoming of truth will give you. That's the power of truth, to give you that freedom and that immortality. And finally, in that, following that truth, being one with the Word, you attain the state when you exist without breath, and the heart slows down, and still you live and are more alive than in outward consciousness. Isn't that immortality? But you will never know it unless you do it. You will never know it unless you do the meditations of self-realization fellowship and make God your own. That's welcoming truth. You cannot help but be vindicated in the end if you keep at it. It's bound to win. That's spiritual law. So realize the greatest thing the truth can give us is freedom and immortality. And I'll close with reading a few words which the Master wrote to me back a few years. He said this, and this sums up the subject, the power of truth. He wrote this, Dear Doctor, since virtue, which means truth, is so hidden by obvious triumphs of vice, which is so. On every side we see vice triumphant. But in spite of that, he goes on to say, God alone can show how his unbeatable virtue secretly wins in the end. So there's no other way to offset the evils and the untruth except to know God. And knowing him you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And he concludes, wars are not won only by big cannons and money and armament and airplanes, but by good national karma, finally, God's grace. And so the supreme treasure which we can attain by the power of truth is to know God alone, because God alone is supreme truth.